Hey guys, I'm here to do another book review. I'm doing something slightly different, and this is going to just be a more talky video. So, today I will be talking about The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. So, I read this book back in December last year and I finished it in January. So this is obviously a very late review, but I honestly really loved the book. So I'm going to kind of go into details as to what I thought was good about it and also what I wasn't so keen on, but I'm also going to talk about what I'm looking forward to seeing in the film later this year. So, for anyone who doesn't know, The Hate You Give is a YA novel and it focuses on Angie Thomas's lead protagonist Starr, and she is caught up in a movement to end police brutality, and it's very strongly influenced by the Black Lives Matter movement. So this is about Starr, who is 16, and she's in between two worlds where she lives in the poorer side of town in a predominantly black area, but she goes to a very prestigious, mostly white school. So you kind of see Starr trying to find her own identity and also kind of feeling very torn between where she's obviously been born and raised and also where she's kind of forming her own ideas and ideology at school and all the kind of complex sides of coming from a different area but finding yourself and finding your voice. So the first thing I want to talk about is the writing, and I absolutely fell in love with Angie Thomas's style of writing. I felt like she had such a unique voice. It felt so real, so grounded, had so much maturity and depth, and I felt like Starr was a very relatable character, and it was very interesting, kind of being inside her head and learning stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think from reading certain situations, but I found it very relatable in many other ways for myself as a reader. For example, I really identified with Star's for Star's love of Harry Potter, but also kind of coming from one area and one background, and then being in a completely different environment. So I kind of related to Star's mindset when it came to her home life versus her education. I mean, for me, I predominantly lived in a very lower class area when I was younger, but moving on to college and then university, I was one of very few disabled people in class, whereas the majority of people there were able-bodied. So I did feel the difference between going living at home and then living in two different areas and then kind of going on to education and it being very different and feeling your difference is kind of looked at more from other people rather than yourself. So you do kind of feel very aware. I related to Star's mentality of that she had to be better, like just to kind of show that she deserved to be there. So I really identified with that. Also, I love the pop culture references, which some authors kind of really do throw it in just to try and make it look current or modern. But I feel like with Angie Thomas, the way she wrote it, it felt very true to the character. And also, it was really well written, and I felt like the character had such a unique voice. Right, so with the plot, I actually really enjoyed the narrative structure of the story. I felt like the stages that Starr went through as a character, because you see she witnesses a police shooting of her childhood best friend Khalil, and the stages of grief she goes through, and also the way the police handle it, but also the way the community handles it as well. You get a real sense of community within this book, which I really enjoyed, because most books, if they're kind of set within a working class poor area, They don't really go into the fact that some communities can be very tight knit, and that's what I enjoyed about Star's story and world building, was that the community were very close knit and they did care a lot about each other, which I really enjoyed. But there were darker sides to it as well, which I thought Angie Thomas did really good at showing the balance of it. So we kind of see Starr kind of move through the plot as she kind of grieves for her friend Khalil, and then you kind of see her get more involved in activism, and you see her become more aware of how her white friends see her background and also her upbringing, and she really has to try and balance her both of her universes as now they're kind of coming together, and you kind of see her become much more stronger and bolder. But I felt like it did really good at showing the balance of the police side of it, with Star's uncle being a member of the police force, and also her home side, and also her school side with her friends and her boyfriend. And I felt like it did a real good job at showing an interracial relationship, but a healthy one, where you was also kind of, both characters didn't see their races as an issue, but then they had to become more aware of it as the story progressed. You really kind of got to see how both Starr and Chris became aware of their relationship a bit more, but despite all of that, it didn't stop them from being in love, or it didn't damper on their relationship, which quite a few times I've noticed in books where characters are from two different either social backgrounds or ethnic backgrounds. That becomes a huge conflict within the book, and most of the time the relationships end despite how healthy or compatible they are well together. So I was really glad this book didn't fall into that stereotype and still had a strong mixed race relationship, but both characters becoming aware of their differences and still loving each other regardless. So I thought that was great. Right, next I'm going to talk about characters. I spoke about Starr a lot in my other sections of this review, but as Starr is the main character, I have to say I really, really thought she was such a well-rounded, complex character, and I loved seeing the world through her perspective, because we got to see a young girl who was living in a working class background, and you got to see her in a more up class educational environment. So seeing her balance two universes in her mind and just two different worlds, and how she did that, but also how she became more politically aware, and her movements towards activism was also great. But I just really think she was a really well-rounded character. So yeah, Starr was brilliant. One of my favourite female protagonists. Another thing about the characters which I really enjoyed was the family aspect within this book, and just Star's parents and her siblings, and that kind of dynamic which you don't really see a lot in YA literature. It's almost like the authors kind of ignore the fact that these are teenagers, and they kind of ignore the family aspects, even though that's an important aspect in anyone's life, whether you're an adult, teenager or child. Your family are a huge influence on you. So what I loved about this was that Star's parents were such well-rounded characters, and I loved the fact that the father didn't fall into the stereotypical working class father. Like, he was there for his kids, he'd done time in prison, but all around he was a good father. And once he got out, he'd gone on the straight and narrow, he was consistent, he had a good job. So I found that really refreshing to see a very good father figure, but also acknowledging that he did have many faults, and he is sincerely regrettable of them. So he wasn't without fault, but he embraced his faults, and he was making amends, which I thought was great. Star's mum was also a really great addition in this story. I love the fact that she was such a strong female character, and her relationship with Seven, her husband's son from a prior sexual relationship, which in any other story would have got very messy. She took on this child and loved him as her very own. And I loved seeing Seven's relationship with her. And there's one point in the book where he's having an argument with his biological mother, and he says that Star's mother is actually his real mother, the woman who's been there for him. And she hears this, and I thought that was such a beautiful moment. Even though we're seeing it from Star's perspective, for Seven to say, no, this is my mother. She has been way more of a mother ever since he was little. This woman has been there, and she's embraced him as her very own. So I love the fact it was such a strong mother figure in this story, and she just cared so much about her kids. And also the fact that she wasn't afraid to kind of move them out of the place where they've been raised, because she had that selfless mentality, which I really, really appreciate. And the parents had such a good, healthy relationship. The fact that they complemented each other so well, and I honestly can't wait to see how the parents and Seven and all of the siblings, how this family is portrayed on screen, because in the book it was just so beautifully written and it felt so real. It was so refreshing to read a book where you like, okay, I could actually see this being a real family. I can relate to certain aspects of this family, and I found it so well done. So I really, really thought the characters were brilliant. Everyone from the friends to the flawed characters to the evil, horrible characters, they were just so well rounded. I felt like Angie Thomas really took the time to develop them as individuals and not just put them into stereotypes, which again, just fantastic. Yeah, so as you can see, I've got nothing but praise for this book because I really, really enjoyed it. There were some points where I thought it did get a little bit slow in the middle, but as it's first person and you're in Star's head for pretty much all of it, you really do get to see Starr go through her dark phase. So I feel like the middle needed to be slow. It needed that kind of calm down after such a dramatic, horrible and very graphic inciting incident to kick it off. You needed to kind of immerse yourself into Garden Heights and Star's relationships and really get an insight into who she is and why she is the way she is before it all picks up again. And it does, it's definitely worth the payoff, but I feel like you needed that calm before the storm to really appreciate what was happening within this world. And the fact that it was so current, I mean, in the UK we are having a lot of gun and knife crime issues, especially within London, but this movement in America is what inspired this book with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I feel like you really needed to get into how this really does affect a family and the community and friends and everyone this kind of happens to, but also the fact it happens to so many people in so many different countries. You needed that calm before the storm and that emotional stillness to kind of stay in that before the action picked up again. So I actually really liked that. I kind of struggled with it because it was quite emotional to read through, but it was so well written I just couldn't put it down. So yeah, I feel like it did kind of get a bit slow in the middle, but you needed that stillness to really appreciate what was happening within the book. So I gave this a 5-star rating on Goodreads because I honestly really enjoyed this book, and I can't stress enough how much I feel like this is an important book. I feel like so many people should read this, and especially now that it's becoming a film, which is another thing I want to talk about before I wrap this up. So the film, The Hate You Give, is coming out October 19th in the States. So I'm really hoping the UK release is going to be around October, November time, because I really can't wait to see this film. But also, yeah, if anyone hasn't seen the trailer, I will link it below. I'll probably also be doing a shot by shot reaction of the video, because the software I'm using right now, I won't be able to add visuals in there like that. So I'll most likely have to go through all of the individual shots and just kind of discuss it from there. Which, you know, if you guys want to see that, I'm more than happy to do. So yeah, I honestly, if you want to be prepared, I'd highly recommend reading the book. But also if you want to go in with an open mind, probably best to kind of avoid the book if you don't want to be spoiled and you just kind of want to watch the film for what it is. But if you do see the film before reading the book, I'd highly recommend reading it afterwards. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this new version of my reviews. If you guys prefer me doing videos like this, I will probably do it some more. I just kind of wanted to see how this video is kind of interpreted with a different type of more podcast review. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you'd like to get a dialogue going in the comments, please let me know what you think of this book. I would love to hear your opinions. And yeah, so that's it from me today. And I hope you enjoyed this review, and you'll most likely see me very soon with another one. Bye.